Hey, Peter, welcome back.
Hey David, welcome back. Another
Eh,
week of Call Me Data.
Yep, welcome to Call Me Data, everybody. And hey,
Yes,
let's jump into it because we have I think, a really interesting topic today. So we're going to
we
talk
do.
about something that you've called deep AI, um, which is a great concept, and it's something that I think is really important. So
Yeah.
you want to introduce the topic for us?
Yeah, look, I think this is an important topic we need to discuss a little further because I think you and many of our chats have been, we've come across customers who are using AI, but they're not using it deeply. And I think that's important to differentiate between how they're using it and what really is a deep AI concept. And because I argument say most companies are not doing AI correctly.
I think that's right. I think especially companies who haven't been doing AI since before the generative AI days. So if Gen AI is
Right.
their first attempts at doing AI, they're probably stuck at, can I call it shallow AI? They're stuck at,
I,
yeah, I mean,
yeah.
they're stuck at personal productivity use cases. Which, don't get
Right.
me wrong, that's great. It's the low-hanging fruit sometimes. I have no problem with that,
Right.
but there's a lot more out there that you can do, right?
Well, there's a lot more out there you can certainly do. And, look, it's obvious most organizations, you're going to grab the easy cases first. You're going to refine your email. You're going to write that report. You're going to use it for generating images or the PowerPoint. But to us, I think that is, we'll call it shallow AI. It's not getting the real value out of the tool. I'll say it's almost like taking a Ferrari and, speed limiting it to 15 miles an hour. It's kind of not making any sense.
Well, let me ask though. I mean, if I'm a business leader and I'm doing that shallow AI, I've deployed AI chatbots and tools to my workforce, and they're using them to make
Right.
themselves more efficient. Isn't that good enough? Like, why are
No.
we having this discussion?
No, we clearly don't think it's good enough. I mean, this is a discussion you and I probably have for over a year. Why? Because you're sitting on so many of your processes and operational and your workflows that can, in fact, be either enhanced or replaced or augmenting individuals to be, have more capacity if you go deep. If you truly go deep and you start asking yourself the truly hard questions, which are usually, can this be done with AI? And not just defaulting to, no, this is not an AI thing and it shouldn't be that. And it's really somebody should be doing this. And, kind of ingrain that question in your head along every decision making point. Can AI do this? Can AI do this? Can AI do this? And I think you'll start going deeper, 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 and deeper, and you'll start answering the question differently than you would at the beginning.
And,
So I think
and
you would.
yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think also, the reality is that while you may be seeing some good productivity gains by deploying AI tools to some of your team, some of your competitors are undoubtedly going deep or looking at going deep, and they will achieve benefits that you can't just through personal productivity, shallow
Right.
AI use cases, right?
Right, right. No, absolutely. So they're going to go after the difficult processes, the ones that are deeply embedded in the organization, or they're going to look for opportunities to increase productivity using some of these very powerful tools. And they're not constrained by their own thinking that, well, I can't use AI for this.
All
In
right, so
fact, it's
so we've got people hopefully convinced, right, that they need to jump into the deep end of the pool. Sorry, that was a
right.
bad pun. Um, let's talk about what deep AI is. Like, how do you define deep AI?
How do you define deep AI? To me, AI that is deep is really embedded in every aspect of your business. It's deeply embedded into the processes that are part of your business, core parts of your business. Maybe they're manufacturing processes. Maybe they're, I don't know, KYC on finance, or maybe they're part of your decision-making process when you do project planning. Maybe they're, helping you with data governance or data management. But where you define, I still find myself falling into this path occasionally. When approached to how to fix a problem, I go back onto the default, which is, well, I have to get a person to do this role, instead of asking the more fundamental question, well, can AI actually do this? And that's the questions that I think lead to much deeper responses.
So, is it safe to say, I mean, based on what we're talking about, that deep AI is a characteristic more of how you're deploying it, how you're using it, than an implicit characteristic of the model or the AI tool you're using?
I think it's different. I think it's even more than that. I think it's a way of thinking.
Yeah, and here's what I find very fascinating. I think, and this is not unexpected, right? Like everyone, when Gen
No,
AI burst onto the scene a couple years ago, we all saw it for the first time through a chat interface. In reality, I've been saying for years, for most people, other than maybe something like an Amazon or a Netflix recommendation engine, this was the first time that they actually saw and interacted with AI, and especially interacted with it, right? When you're on the receiving end of a recommendation engine, you're just getting recommendations. You're not usually interacting. But so this was the first time people interacted. And I think it's become sort of set in a lot of people's minds that generative AI is this chat interface. And it's important when we start thinking about deep AI to separate the chat interface from the underlying models, because that chat is just one way of connecting to and leveraging the power of those models. And deep AI is usually not through a chat interface, I think, right?
no, it might be deeply embedded in your organization. It might be deeply embedded in your processes. You might never even experience it directly. It might be a fine-tuned model that's custom for your organization to using your data for your processes. Again, you might never ever experience directly, but you might experience it through an application. I mean, I kind of almost go back to the heart of the days when the web came out for the first time and people were, the internet hit the scene and all of a sudden everybody was speaking about the internet and how it was going to revolutionize the world and change us. And, for most people it was, looking at moving graphics and, reading websites, and it wasn't much
Right.
more than that. And it was real basic, and you're like, well, I don't really kind of see how this is going to economically change the country. And it took time to people truly understand and embrace what it can do. And I think AI is at that stage right now.
Yeah.
It does a lot of cool, simple things, but the reality is much more powerful.
Chat interfaces are almost the AI equivalent of the digital brochureware that early websites were before you could transact on them
Yes,
and do work on them and
yes,
things. Yeah, I
yeah,
look, I
yeah.
totally think that makes sense. And I want to also pull on the word that you used, embedded, because I think that's another great way to
Mm.
define what is deep AI. It's AI that is embedded into your business process. It's not so if I just have a person who is occasionally using AI to ask a question and, rewrite a document or something, I'm going to call that's sort of on the edge. It's at the edge of the business process, right? It's right there between the human and the process. But within that business process, the AI isn't really embedded in it. It's just something the human uses off to the side. And so deep AI, in my mind, is embedded deeply into, and it's a part of the business process. Is that a fair way to define it as well?
Yes. No, I think that's actually a really good way of looking at it. You're like you said, you're using it kind of at the periphery of the problem itself, but it's not part of the core decision making of the process. And that to me is it's deeper AI. It's deep. You're really trying to take a process that maybe is still it's like I don't know, we call it LOPA, lips on a pig's arse, so to say. In many cases, it's I'm gonna put a chat interface onto a sophisticated application, and I'm
Right.
gonna call it AI enabled. The reality is nothing is AI enabled about it. You're making the user interaction a little bit easier, but the core decision making is still maybe human driven or rules based or some other approach, and it's not
Right.
AI.
Right.
And I think that is it takes a transformation in how people actually think. And I also, and I'll go off on this for a second here, there's so much out there, I call them AI influencers, who, push a lot of this stuff. And they're in many ways doing, I think, a disservice because AI done right is one, I think, hard. Deep AI is certainly hard, but it's also can be deeply altering to an organization and profoundly altering
Yeah.
in a very positive way if it's done correctly. And to me,
Yeah.
that's deep AI.
I look, I think unequivocally, deep AI is where the deep value is, right? Like you're going to see, if it's done right, you'll see way more returns on deep AI than you will on just productivity tools and shallow AI. And by the way, I think what's interesting to me as we talk about this is, prior to the advent of ChatGPT and generative AI, almost all AI that was being deployed in companies was by definition deep AI. So even something like the Amazon.com next book recommendation engine, that's deep AI. There's not like a human sitting at the other end of your web browser saying, what shall I recommend to Peter today? It's baked into the business process. When you log into the browser, it is behind the scenes as part of its page rendering process, making a call to an AI model and deciding what titles to recommend to you. Um,
Yes.
so
Yeah.
that's a probably an example that everyone can see about a real example of a deep embedded AI. Um,
Right. Right.
yeah,
Yeah. No, I think, and again, you and I talk about this, and I think for us it's been second nature to talk about it at this level. But I don't think the market's caught up to it, and I certainly think, and I think I know there's a period of time where executives have to be educated, I think, and really kind of come to terms with the power of this. And that's not something that's going to happen overnight. You have to rely on people who have the deeper experience in this and recognize that I can do a lot more than I'm doing today.
yeah. Well,
And again,
let's
much like
No, I think you're right, and that idea of giving people real examples and what they can do. Let's dive into that. Let's talk about some real world examples of deeply embedded AI, because I think our definition, obviously it makes sense to us because we said it, but I think to bring it to life for people, let's try to talk about some real
no,
examples.
let's
I
do
have
that.
a few. I'm sure you have a few. You want to?
Go. I
Well,
think you go first.
okay, so one of the ones I really like, and I think this is a neat idea, and this is sort of it could be implemented deeply or it could be implemented not so deep, but I think it still is an interesting example, and that is contract data extraction. So the idea that you could have an AI model that is developed to interpret contracts and to extract the information that you care about from those contracts, but even more, that you could have it compare those contracts to other contracts that you've executed in the past and highlight any risks, any major discrepancies in terms of the terms and conditions and the constraints and the covenants and things in those contracts. Um, that's really powerful. Now, you could maybe kind of do that in a shallow way, just because you tell all of the attorneys or all the people in your contracts division to use chat gpt to ask a bunch of questions. But the deep implementation, the embedded implementation of this would be to build it into a system where automatically when you upload a contract, it goes through a series of steps, including doing a terms and entity extraction from the contract, doing a risk analysis of the contract, doing a variance highlight of the contract, and maybe writing you a summary of what needs to be addressed. Right. So it's that again, you're kind of talking about maybe the same tasks, but the fact that you're building them into a system and building them into a business process means that they're going to be done consistently and they're going to be done
Right.
as part of the business process, not just at the whim of an end user. So that's
Right.
one
No.
example.
No, I think that's a great example actually, because you're taking what is really otherwise a fairly complicated, very manual process that might take an extended period of time. And that knowledge of how to do that is in somebody's head. If that person leaves, obviously you lose that knowledge. Where if you did, as you suggested, and deeply, use these models for every aspect of the process, you've now taken that information, that knowledge, you've encoded it into these models. You now have it there to use all the time, and you put some consistency around a process that was, previously driven by individuals, and that is powerful. You've presumably taken something that could have taken days or weeks and have driven it down to a minute or two,
Yeah.
and that's powerful.
Good. Can I share one more with you? And then I'd love to hear your ideas.
Go crazy.
So
Go.
my next one, I think that I was thinking about is in financial institutions, they have a KYC requirement. And for those of you who aren't
Right.
financial institution nerds, KYC is know your customer. And while it sounds like a warm, fuzzy thing, hey, we all want to know our customer, it's actually a set of pretty stringent regulatory requirements around making sure you understand who your customers are, where they're coming from, and it's all about, well, not all, but much of it's about avoiding financial crime and other things. So here's another good example of that, which is imagine that you set up a system with a model that is going to go out for your large customers and it's going to do some research on that customer. It's going to look for politically exposed person connections. So that's a customer who either is or is connected closely to someone with political exposure. Therefore, there's risks of bribery and other things, right? Looking for adverse events, things that could affect their creditworthiness or even their likelihood to attempt fraud. Um, and overall doing sort of a summary of their sources of income, sources of revenue, and things like that, right? So
Right,
these are things
right.
that compliance departments do every day in a bank. Um, Now, the embedded part is, imagine instead of waiting for a compliance person to go and say, I want to do research, KYC research on Peter. What if every day automatically or every periodically automatically you just run these searches on your top clients and you're refreshing constantly these client files and you're looking for these adverse events, looking for political
Mhm.
exposures, etc., and surfacing those when they happen. That's interesting because instead of it being a, annual event, it becomes this ongoing process because you've
Right.
embedded that capability into your business process. And that's maybe another hallmark of many deep AI applications is the trigger is something other than human deciding to do something, right? The trigger is time or an external event detected or something else, but it's not just because a person decides or feels like using a tool.
No, I think that is an awesome example at KYC, and understanding the complexity. And I have some experience in KYC space. For a very long time, there were a lot of software companies out there popping up, trying to automate part of the process through, I'll call it funky math, for lack of a better way of putting it. Basically, at the end of the day, it's sophisticated math. I'm trying to find correlations and, relationships between things that don't seemingly have any relationships. Something that AI and these models excel at incredibly well is finding those subtle pieces of information and bringing them together and finding a relationship between them. Something that is not obvious. And I think, like you stated, being able to do this in a real time or semi real time fashion on an ongoing basis provides a level of safety, I think, to a
Yep.
bank organizations that otherwise you wouldn't get. And to me, that's, like you
Yeah.
said, that's deep AI. That is deeply embedded in your business. That's not relying on an individual
Right.
to make a call. That's relying on a tool to find a relationship between pieces of information and saying, hey, you know what? This is something you got to look at. There's something going on here.
You just said something really interesting. I'm going to go off piece just a second too, because you talked about the fact that these are very reliable agents, and a lot of people might look at some of these examples and other potential applications and say, oh, but I'm worried about AI. Is it going to be reliable? Is it going to be dependable? And yes, that's a very good question to ask. But I would say before you decide you don't trust AI, remember that AI never gets tired. AI never slacks off. AI pays just as much attention reading contract number 999 as it did contract number one. And so
Yep.
the real thing you have to ask yourself is not, is AI infallible? No, it's not. It is, will AI outperform humans, or can it be used in a way that enriches human performance? Right? It doesn't have to be perfect, because we're certainly not perfect, and a lot of these human jobs are, done by fallible people. So I just wanted to throw that in there. But listen, I'd love to
Oh,
hear.
that's a no. What you said is, I'm sorry, I mean to cut you off, Bill. You're 100% correct. I mean, it's there all the time. It works. It will benefit, and these models are only going to continue to improve and achieve greater levels of accuracy. And I would say out of the gate, they're going to be far more accurate than humans are going to be in the first place. And you need to having these tools embedded deeply in your processes is going to be a massive positive. Some of the things that I think about,
Yeah.
one in particular, and it's always been near and dear to my heart, and I've spoken about it before. Like you, finance experience. I, was deeply involved in the research process for a long time. And I remember looking at it closely and understanding, is this a place for automation? It is largely a very people-driven process. And what I mean by research, I mean equity research, analysts who research companies and then provide some recommendations on them and seek to understand the company and the space that they're in, the domain, whatever it is, pharmaceuticals or finance or manufacturing, and get a
Yeah.
clearer picture. And you're largely dependent upon an individual who has a lot of experience, who's been working in that space for a long time, maybe develop their own custom models that they like and they work with. But like most humans, we have a finite capacity to look at information. And they're always looking for new sources of information to better understand their companies. And they do it usually quarterly, unless something happens, in which case they might put out an advisory associated with it. And they can only look at a finite number of pieces of information. I mean, look, we're humans. There's only so much we could juggle and make decisions about. Now, just imagine you have a tool that's out there with a whole bunch of agents running. scouring the web, pulling in all this other pieces of information, bringing it together on an ongoing, continual basis,
Right.
and making recommendations or whatever it may be, or adjusting based on current market changes or news changes in places where you might not expect it. Like maybe something happened in Europe someplace and you never detected it, but it's going to have ripple effects in the US and those types of things. I always thought, artificial intelligence and generative AI would have a broad impact in this
Yeah.
particular domain in a way that is profound. And, just taking it a step further, there are, say thousands and thousands of equities that are traded on the market, only a small percentage of which are followed by an analyst.
Right.
There's a
Right.
whole slew, and probably because of regulatory reasons and changes in a lot of the regulatory laws out there, and most banks don't have analysts on stocks,
Right.
and there's a lot of information that's not used. So,
I mean, that's a great. I like that example a lot because if you think about these well-known equity analysts, there's a few of them that are sort of household names, or at least depends on your household. But
so
yeah, but they're well known, and but the problem is like even a well-known equity analyst, yeah, they might have some assistants in their departments and whatnot, but there's a limit, as you said, to how much they can cover. And so this kind of DPI, the way you described it, is almost like a force multiplier. You can take a well-known analyst and I won't quite say clone their brain, but train an AI specifically based on their analysis style and whatnot, and really expand their reach.
yeah,
So, yeah.
right. No, dramatically and real time, and analyze pieces of information that otherwise wouldn't have been looked at before.
Now,
And
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
no, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
Well, yeah, as you're saying that, I'm thinking I can hear people, I can almost hear eyes rolling back in heads of people going, I'm never going to let an AI model replace, my trusted advisor over here. And, my
Yep.
response is, okay, fair enough, because to be honest, what we also are saying is we're not suggesting that you fire the analysts and you have all AI. What we're suggesting is that you come up with the right human in the loop, human oversight model that allows that analyst to have a force multiplier of 1,000 AI agents working on his or her behalf, but you ultimately still want the responsibility, the accountability to lie with the human. And depending on what you're doing, that may mean the human has to actually sign off on every single output, or it may mean that the human is monitoring and looking for outliers. Like there are a lot of different ways for the human to be in the loop. But I think before people
100%.
get too scared, you should remember that like we are advocating that for a lot of processes, there should be a human in the loop, on the loop, etc. Um, yep.
Right, right. And I don't, you and I, at least not at this stage of technology, is suggesting that you have somebody or something make a decision on your behalf all the time. Yeah, yes, you could, depending on the nature of the decision you made. But yeah, having a human in the loop, I think, is critical. I think what we're suggesting is these are very complex, sophisticated problems
Yeah.
that done right, right data, AI is deeply embedded in these processes in a way that previously only a human would have done, and not very effectively, I would argue, in many cases.
So if this is so powerful, right? Like the examples we gave are clearly, I think, are super powerful for companies. I mean, imagine being able to effectively clone your star equities analyst
Right.
and cover stocks that your competitors simply can't cover. Right? Huge competitive benefit. So why aren't more companies doing this already? Like why are companies still in the shallow end of the pool? Um,
I could name lots of reasons, and I'm sure you could too. Part of it's education and understanding, and really having a deeper understanding of what they can do. And I would argue to some degree that's a large part of the problem. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm missing it a little bit, but I don't think most individuals pivot all the time to why can't AI do this? It's just not in their vernacular. It's not how they think. They're not yet at that level of thinking in their just, when they're looking at their processes in a company, it's always, and look, I find myself falling into it occasionally also. What? Again, put in the people, a person is do this instead of saying, hey, look, yeah, it's normal. I mean, it's just, we've been doing this for a long time. but it's hard to
So
change how the pathway you follow.
so it's almost like a, in that sense, a learning curve problem that people are trying to figure this out and need to need to be aware of it as a thing they can do even.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think yes, I think that's certainly part of it. I don't know what your thoughts are. I'd be curious to hear what you think. Or am I making that one up totally? And
No, no,
putting my
I agree with you. I agree. I think it's, when I look at, it's funny, like I was noticing over the weekend, my YouTube feed was full of ads and videos for like, use this AI to write, 100 children's books a
I
month and publish
know.
them and
Yeah,
make money, right? And that is just a crock, right? That is,
I know.
yes,
I know.
you can publish these books, but they will be terrible. They will be low quality, and you will not make tens of thousands of dollars without lifting a finger. I'm sorry, right? But I
I
bring
know.
that up because I think part of the challenge is the discourse, whether it's in the popular media, whether it's in this new wave of AI tech influencers, whether it's what's written
Hmm.
about in journalism, so much of the discourse is around these honestly kind of fluffy, cheesy, not very interesting
100%.
ways to use AI.
Yes. 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 And yes. And this drives me absolutely bonkers crazy. And I'm going to cut you off for 1 second because every single day I log on to my LinkedIn and I see my feed, and it is filled with either puff pieces that are meaningless. They are so superficial. They are of absolutely no value. Or, and I term these the other one, the sexy picture puff pieces, which I see a lot of those. I see a lot of people posting, I will call it the sexy picture influence pictures that speak about AI, yet they're all puff pieces. And I honestly think it diminishes the conversations that should be having, which are far deeper, far harder, far more complicated, and far more relevant than, can I write my email 10 times faster with AI? And here's a sexy picture. So that it drives me nuts.
So here's the weird part, and you're right. I see this all the time, and it's annoying, and it also uncovers, I think, something else going on, which is individuals are talking about AI, like these self-styled solo entrepreneurs or whatever. Like I
Right.
wrote books with AI. Great. People, individual workers, are talking about AI, and I read a study about a month and a half ago that said that something like almost 80% of people in the survey said that they were using AI at work without or even against the policy of their employees, without permission or against policy. And so
Yes.
they're using it because it made them more effective, but it's against policy. So flip that around. You know who's not talking about AI? Okay, everyone's talking about AI, except you know where they're not talking about it enough? The
Where?
boardroom, right?
You're right.
Business
Yes.
leaders, business executives are not
Right.
generally not
Right.
spending enough time deeply thinking about what are they going to do with AI once they've
Yeah.
rolled out chat tools to their workforce. How are they actually going to use it in a way that matters,
Well,
right?
so now you bring up a nice segue into why most companies stay shallow.
Yeah, yeah. Why?
And that's a big part of it. Yes, you get the wrong. We got to do AI. We got to do AI. But beyond knowing how to spell AI, they don't know what it's capable of doing. That I know. I don't. And I don't. And I will look. It's a journey. It's a complicated technology. At the end of the day, it really is. It's a deeply complicated, sophisticated technology, and I understand that it's going to take a long time for companies to truly understand. But I think a lot of the vendors out there too are doing themselves a massive disservice,
Yeah.
and they're not moving the argument or the discussion forward, and they're not elevating it to where it should be.
Very good point. I think that, so there's all these forces sort of combining to make it it just hasn't quite reached the forefront of the dialogue yet. But for the companies that do get the joke, as it were, and do understand the tremendous value that they can unlock with AI, it's time. And frankly, if you're not doing it, there's a good chance your competitors are. So that's what keeps me up at night.
Yeah.
But let's talk to. So I want to hear about the patented Peter Beman 5-step process for implementing deep AI. All joking aside, you had come up with a series of things to think about and sort of major considerations. Let's talk through those because assuming there's a CEO out there who has said,
Right.
"Wow, these guys are right. I need to get on this. Where do I start?" Let's talk through
I
your
will
five
always.
steps.
Let's talk through the one that I always like, and if for whatever reason, businesses don't do this. At least not yet, and it really should be business first AI. This has been our topic from day one. Businesses need to be involved, not at the end of the process, not later on, not let IT play with it for a year before business gets introduced to it. From the get go, business needs to be involved, and not only involved, it needs to be business first. They are. It needs to be focused on real world business problems that are going to have real impact on the firm.
All right.
That
So
is not normally what gets done.
step one, lead with a business first AI. I
Right.
completely agree. I am distraught some days with how many AI
Mhm.
initiatives are,
Yep.
someone with a hammer looking for a nail and starting to whack everyone on the head because I've got a hammer. And you might
Yes.
occasionally hit a nail, and it might be good,
Right.
but you're going to hit lots of other stuff too, and you're going to get a really tired arm from
Right.
swinging that hammer without hitting enough nails. Like,
Yep.
yeah. So
Yeah, and you're gonna see a lot of money go flying out the window because it's I gotta throw money at AI. Let's throw money at AI. It's so important. Let's the board will approve. Let's spend millions of dollars on this newfangled tool AI, but we really don't know what it does. And I
so where
think
does it start? I guess it starts with, if you're doing business first, it starts with, what's my business strategy? What are my priorities? What are the
right.
challenges and headwinds that I'm facing? What are the opportunities I want to exploit? Basic business things, and then you say, where and how can I apply AI to these? Not, hey, I've got AI, where shall I stick it? Right?
No, 100%. I think you're right. And I'll even say there is step point five between step one. And that really is having a modicum of understanding of the capabilities. And that doesn't mean, as the CEO, I have to have a deep, deep, deep knowledge how a language model works, but I should be able to have a little bit of understanding. You go down the tier, the pyramid, in the organization, they should each have a deeper level of understanding of the technology because I think, and you know as well, educated consumers of this technology are far better. You're going to have less
Yeah.
likelihood of
Yeah.
having issues.
Yeah.
Um,
Look, I'll
but I
I'll
think
s- I'll say it very, very strongly too. AI and generative AI are the most transformative technology of our time, for better or for
yes,
worse. They are here and they will be transformative. And it's not unreasonable to say, therefore, to business leaders, you need to know these things. You need to understand
right,
this at some level, right?
right.
Because how do you expect to
It's
be leading a company or department or a team in the year
thank you.
2025
Yes,
and not
yes.
understand how AI works?
It's like hiring a CFO who doesn't understand finance or a CEO
Yeah,
who doesn't understand sales and finance. Well, you can
right.
put somebody at the top of the helm of a multi-billion-dollar company who doesn't understand basic finance and sales? Hell no, you're not going to do that. They
That's a
need to have
great
this
example.
information, make
Every
decisions.
every CEO needs to understand and does understand how their balance sheet operates. That's just, they're not the CFO. The CFO is the expert, but a CEO understands the balance sheet, among other things, right? They're expected to. And I think the same is true with AI. A modern CEO should be expected to understand AI at a certain level. They don't have to
Yes.
be the deepest expert, but they better get it beyond just a shallow, acronym dropping level. Um, and most CEOs today, they fail that test, right? Now,
No, most at the C level fail that test. Look, unless you're a CIO, and I think even a lot of them fail the test. And that's not to diss anybody, but I think it's absolutely critical. Again, you're making decisions about a technology or use of a technology which will have and make no. Again, I'm not one to prone to hyperbole. Will have profound, broad, deep implications on your business. You should understand it.
yeah, yeah, I agree. All right, let's talk to step two. I think
Data, data,
data.
data, and data. You and I like to talk about it all the time. Yes, data. Data is foundational. I don't
So
want
foundational, we named a podcast after it.
to. Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
Dates. The company's all based on data.
yeah, yep.
It's all about data, and we know it's all about data. It's amazing to me, and I'm sure to you as well, how that falls on deaf ears for most people, or they'll get out there and trout well, I know data's the new oil, or the data's this, or the data's that, and then you look under the covers and you do a little bit of a peek under their sheets, and you go, yeah, well, you might be walking the walk, but you're not talking the talk.
Yeah. I mean, here's the part that always blows me away. You talk to business leaders and say, tell me about your technology investments, right? And they can tell you things like, the size of the IT department. That's the human side of it. They'll tell
Yeah.
you that they run, 4,000 applications. That's the application side of things. They might even tell you about their infrastructure. Oh, we're on this cloud provider and that cloud provider, and we have these two data centers, and we have a gigabit network that spans the globe. That's the infrastructure. But you know what they never tell you about unless you pull it out of them? They never tell you about the data. And
No,
right, and you and I would argue the data is more important than any of those other
all the
things.
above. All the
Right.
above. Exactly.
So if you're a leader and you're trying to prepare to go deep on I think it's pay attention to your data, learn where it is, learn what you've got, and start to think about, is it safe? Is it protected? Is it clear and understandable? Like, do you know where the value lies? And chances are, not only do you not know, but a lot of people in most people don't know. And so it's time to go on a journey of discovery and figure out, what do you have?
It's funny you should say that. And yeah, I should say it's to you and me. It's completely self-evident. And I remember it was a place that I know about, which was supposed to be data driven. And then when you start talking about just good data management procedures and processes and doing things the right way to get a control of your information, it was oh, we can't talk about that. We don't want anything to do with that. And even though they might have had 1,000 data sets, and we don't
Right.
do that, it's not relevant. And it couldn't have not been more false, because it was extraordinarily highly relevant, and they didn't realize they didn't know what they didn't know. They didn't know what they had, and they had no way of bringing it together to even create more value within the firm, which to me was far more frightening.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
it's that's how most companies operate, though.
Yeah. Even the ones that call themselves data driven, I have a little personal
I know.
challenge I issue in my own head to people when they say they're data driven. I always like to say, oh, that interesting. What does that mean? And sometimes you watch them like break out into sweats because they realize it's a buzzword they've been conditioned to use, but they can't actually explain it. Um,
No, no,
right.
no, you're absolutely right. They cannot. And there's one other little tweak I want to add to this while we're kind of on this topic. And it's something that you and I have seen at most organizations, and it's how IT in general is funded within the organization and how it's perceived. And it's perceived as a cost, it's as a cost center. It's not necessarily for profit driven. And I
Yeah.
think that really constrains, because most companies by default are taking AI and putting it in under the CIO, rightly or wrongly, I think wrongly, but it's viewed as a cost center, and therefore it needs to be constrained by
Yep.
costs. And
Yep.
that to me is a very limiting perspective. You know, Data aside, that mentality has to change, because yeah, it's going to cost you money, but it's no different than investing in a new product in your firm. You're going to invest before you see the results. You need to view it that
You
way.
would you would invest capital in building a new production facility if you were convinced it was going to dramatically increase your profits and your market share. And yes, agree. All right, let's move on to
Yes.
we're only through two out of the five steps, so
All right. We'll keep these
let's
next three faster
tack
then.
the other. Step
All right.
three, embedding in workflows. I mean, this is really the central part of what we talked about, right? Like,
Yes. Yes.
don't let
This is the
people just use it on a dashboard or report telling them what the AI said, because the problem is you're leaving too much human variability in there. You're actually counting on a human to see the recommendation or the next best action or the prediction or whatever it is and do the right thing with it. And we all know that as humans, we're not always the most reliable, predictable actors.
No, no, quite the opposite, actually. We are highly unreliable, never predictable. And depending on the mood of the day, God knows what's going to come out of your mouth sometimes. We're all the same way. I think that's just human nature. And yeah, having something that's embedded deeply in the process that will respond consistently is critical. So yes, you have to embed these deep in, like you said, this is the whole premise of this podcast, is
Yeah,
embedded in your processes. Don't leave it at the periphery. It's not going to help you. It doesn't change
totally
anything,
agree. Totally
you
agree.
know.
Um,
So
yeah, I like that one.
four.
Step four, change management. Good one.
Yeah, this I think goes unspoken about. It's having a process in place to make modifications and align incentives properly, which they're usually not. And I think that's a big part of the issue. I'm big. It's one of the many issues, but making sure that your incentives and your change managers all align properly, because it has to be an iterative process in place. You can't just one day wake up and magic occurs and all of a sudden you're fully AI enabled. It's going to be a journey, people.
I think that incentive alignment is massive, right? It's all the usual things around change management. It's communicating to people, educating them, helping them understand what's going to happen. But you can do all those things right, and if you don't find a way to align people's incentives, to align how you reward them and how you compensate them with the kind of actor you want them to be in this AI enabled world, everything else will be wasted effort.
100%. Absolutely agree with you. And these are the things I think a lot of companies just forget about. They don't think about it. They don't even think about them. They just never even get to this point. Um, and then lastly, and I think this is obviously very important, is, and it's funny, it was a book I read a long time ago. You can't, I'll paraphrase it a little bit. You can't fix what you can't measure. You can't make better what you can't measure. So if you're not measuring, you don't know if you're getting any good results out of it. And you've pointed out many cases where, things were improperly measured and the results that they were getting, even though things were automated, were actually worse before they were
Right.
automated.
Right. And it's often I find that people instinctively that your first attempt at what to measure isn't always the right thing, right? You might be
No.
measuring something that's like an ancillary result of the process you're trying to automate or the AI you're trying to enable. So I think it's probably there's an art to figuring out what's the actual metric, what's the actual
It's
indicator
not
of
easy.
success here. Um, yeah,
It's not easy.
and and only when you do that can you A, justify the investment you're making, and B, know if it's effective and what you need to do to enhance it, transform it, modify it, etc. Like you can't, you're flying blind without the right measurements.
And
And
that's a skill in of itself.
yeah, it's funny because I talked to a CIO many years ago, um, and this CIO was effectively trying to say that they were achieving their goals because they had invested so heavily in ERP applications. And I kept asking, like, okay, so what are you seeing from that? Like, how is that working for you? What's the business seeing? And they kept coming back to the size of the investment and the level of commitment and the percentage of the IT workforce that had been trained on supporting and enhancing this ERP package. And there's no doubt they had gone full in on it and they had spent a lot of time and energy. And I applaud them for that. But here's the thing, the business wasn't actually seeing the results. It was a nice tech strategy, but no one had been measuring the business results. And if you looked at customer satisfaction scores, you looked at the customer servicing costs, you looked at cost of sales, all of these other, some of the finance costs, actually, finance costs were going up in this particular case because the tool wasn't adapted to their business process and there were lots of extra steps. So, like, from a business metrics perspective, this was an abject failure.
You describe projects that I've come across of similar many times where they're IT driven projects. They're not the right metrics in place from the business side, or the business wasn't pulled in at the right time, and they want to cast them as being successful, but they've made things more complicated. They've made things longer. They're not satisfying or doing what they should be doing in the first place. And I think especially with AI, having that C-level involvement and driving it forward, I think, is always critical. But coupled with, again, heavy business involvement, coupled with asking the right hard questions in terms of metrics,
Yeah,
and
I
that's
agree.
hard.
It's very hard. All right, so here's what I'd like to do. I'm going to recap the
Yep.
5.5 steps in Peter Memon's patented um, deep embedded AI formula for success. Right. Step 0.5 was be educated, learn about
Yes.
AI beyond just the surface level, and that means business leaders understanding how it
Yep.
works. Step
Yep.
one was business first AI that's focused on your business objectives and strategy, not trying to find a
Yes.
place for AI. Step
Yep.
two was your data, pay attention to your data.
Hmm.
Step three was embed it into your workflows. Don't just rely on humans to decide to use it. Step four was change management. And step five was find the right ways to measure success and output.
Yep.
I think,
That's it.
look, those are 5.5 fantastic ideas. I think, that was worth the price of admission
Yep.
today, if nothing else.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. Those are my pearls of wisdom for today.
Okay. All right.
Moving
Can I
on.
call you Pearl? Okay, Pearl, thanks.
You call
So, Peter, is another good discussion on AI, this time around deep embedded AI. I think great topic. Thank you for bringing this one up. I think it was time well spent. Hope everyone that watched it learned a lot. And the takeaway for me is if you're only thinking about AI as a personal productivity tool for your workforce, you are missing the boat, and it's not too late, but it will be too late if you don't find that boat and start heading towards it.
Yeah, no, 100%. Again, David, it was another great conversation. And to cap it off, if I'm somebody sitting at the C level, I should be asking myself these questions. What more can we do? And that question shouldn't stop answering. I'm sorry, you shouldn't stop asking that question until you're at a point where you really say, "There's nothing else I can do." In fact, we've made everything AI enabled. So you have to continually ask yourself that question to get the most out of this, and surround yourself with the right people. I think
Yep.
that's also very critical.
Yep, I think that's good. That very, very good conversation. Thank you.
Yes.
Before we go, I also wanted to just show you the latest Aloha shirt. So this one is hard to see, but right in the middle is a puffer fish. So this has
Oh, I see that.
bonsai trees and puffer fish. I'm not sure why that exact combination, but I kind of
I
liked
love it
it.
though. I do love it. That is awesome. And I got a surprise for the next one. I don't have an Aloha shirt,
Oh,
but I have
oh.
something equally as fascinating.
All right. All right. Now I can't wait till the next episode so I can see
We'll,
what you've
we'll,
got up your sleeve.
yes, I will show that next one. I didn't have time to set it up before the podcast. So
Well, thank you everyone for joining us again
thank you,
at Call Me Data. And Peter, always a pleasure to talk to you soon.
David. Always a pleasure. Have a great day, everybody. Bye now.